With the current state of things in the guitar digital gear space, we're currently seeing a little bit of a trend towards this kind of idea of creating tone models, creating profiles, creating captures. I think the Headrush Prime would be the latest thing that is doing a version of this. Of course, it dates all the way back to Kemper. Then Moore did a version of it. Then Neural DSP brought out their own version of it, which people like Rabea told us was better than the Kemper, didn't they? I think the consensus at this point is that for heavier stuff, potentially the quad cortex captures are a bit more accurate than Kemper. For everything else, I think it's probably a little bit of a wash in my experience. Then ToneX came along, which is, incrementally improving potentially on what the quad cortex can do, partly because it will take, on my machine, which is like a middle of the road, fairly decent spec machine, it takes 40 minutes to create a really accurate, or the most accurate that they can, tone model. And then Headrush is the same sort of idea. I've not seen particular examples of it, but I'm imagining it's within the ballpark. Now, in the intro there, I was playing Wayne Baser, my friend's Dumble capture that he created on quad cortex. Now, he has a real Dumble, and this kind of just makes me think how much I would rather have Wayne send that to someone who knew how to model, or, was able of creating a model. So you could have someone like Cliff from Fractal, or, the guys at Line 6, who I think do create really great models of stuff. Now, the reason that models exist is because they're a way of representing a relatively complex problem, and the idea of models is, in some cases, to predict stuff and use maths and algorithms and all this sort of stuff. The difference is that if you have a capture or a tone model, it's a static thing which is fixed in time, and as soon as you deviate from it, and this may or may not matter, in fact, it's no longer particularly accurate. It's not able to predict what would have happened on the real amp, and that's kind of the fundamental difference between these things and creating models of stuff, right? And I think there's a necessary amount of work that goes into creating a decent model of an amp. Folks at Nembrini, folks at Scuffum, folks at Line 6, folks at Fractal, some of the folks at Neural as well, chaps that spend a lot of time coding these things. Creating a capture, creating a profile, leans heavily on basically a neural network, apparently, and these things can be fairly accurate, to the point where it's very easy to fool most people, I think, most of the time. On certain things, no. So when it comes to things like a fuzz pedal, or things even like a tube screamer, most of these manufacturers even say that it can't accurately capture fuzz pedals or tube screamers. And that's because I think there's a certain amount of time that it has to, like things that have sag over time, like a compressor would, or like a fuzz pedal does, like where the tone has an envelope that changes, they still can't capture those types of things. And that, for me, is one area where you question then, well, Wayne's real Dumble, are there, how many of the nuances are we missing when we have this one kind of capture of it? Like, can it get us in the ballpark? So I've done captures of a fuzz, and it kind of sounds vaguely like it. Doesn't sound exactly like it. Same with the tube screamer thing. And same, I captured my kind of Eric Johnson type lead from the Helix, and it was kind of close, but not really exactly the thing. It kind of missed some of the, basically the things that change over time. So that has like a fuzzy element to it. So that's one problem that you have. These captures at the moment, they're still missing elements. And given that a lot of it is kind of neural network based, is that going to improve over time, or is it kind of a fixed thing? I don't know. Or do they just have to come up with an entirely new algorithm that can then take into consideration that the note changed over time? I don't know. Would that create an even longer process of creating the tone model? Because at the moment, say 40 minutes for a tone model, how many amp sounds are there, for instance, in Joe Bonamassa's Dumble ODS that you would want? This was why the first question that I asked to the chaps at IK Multimedia was, are you going to create a model of this? Because I'd much rather have a working model that I can get in there and change tones, because I might dial in things way differently to you. I might dial things in way differently to Wayne. So people that are used to dialing in stuff, I think, in general, are going to be happier working with a model of the amp, a working model, than they are scrolling through someone's captures. The problem with captures and the problem with profiles, all of this stuff, is that there's very limited detail to go on. Basically, it's just someone chooses a name for the thing. They might write in it which mic was used, which cab. Are they going to write the tone stack positions? And can you change the tone stack once it's captured anyway? No. So you're kind of just limited to as many choices as they've been able to make. If it's taking 40 minutes at a time, for someone to even make 10, it's going to take them a lot of time. The Quad Cortex and the Kemper are slightly quicker than this, but still, generally, I think what I've experienced is that a Kemper profile pack might be between 15 and 30 per amp, and you pay like a bunch of money for one of them. How much does that actually cover what's in the amp? It's just completely missing, I think, so much depth that you can get from the modeling side of things that, for me, it's a quick way to get a tone, but I don't think it's the best way to get a tone necessarily. It can definitely be a useful tool, but in terms of actually cataloguing the range of tones that you can get out of one amp, I think there's no one really out there that has got anywhere close to doing that. Like, how many profiles would you actually need of a Fender Twin? Or maybe you just say, well, there's this very limited range of uses of Fender Twin, and these are the tones that I like. That's the one way of cataloguing it, but I don't think it really addresses the thing completely. And say you've got this Dumble ODS, which is sitting in Wayne's room in his studio, and you think, well, there's a clean channel on that, there's a drive channel, there's a jazz rock switch, there's a deep kind of switch, there's a mid switch, there's a bright switch, there's a presence control, and there's a PAB where you can pull out the tone stack. How much time would it take to create a full library of the relevant captures? It could take forever, right? And get to it, Wayne. So that, for me, is why modeling is always going to have a space, because there just isn't enough time, and there's not the interface to actually cope with that number of things. This can take 150 tone models. I think the Quad Cortex can take, lots more than that, and the Kemper can take 1,000, and then it starts to kind of get really slow and sluggish. But, as a user, navigating your way through 1,000, which reasonably, maybe you don't need that many, but if you've got 10 amps in there, 10 amps, maybe you have 10 profiles per amp, this problem escalates hugely, And that's exactly the problem that modeling solves, because it puts a skin on all of those options and many more that you don't see under the hood, and kind of wraps it in a neat little bow. That's, for me, why modeling is going to be better than profiling, for as long as that is still the case. Maybe someone can come along and solve those user issues, but until they can accurately capture a fuzz, I think there's still a long way to go. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments if you want. Oh, WBACER on the Neural Cortex Cloud is where you can find the Dumble captures from Wayne if you're interested in playing through those.